Good morning, everyone. Welcome all veterinarians and the guests who are here for the sixth webinar of the Wildlife Disease Investigation webinar series 2024-25. I welcome all of you on behalf of Asian Elephant Support and Life Trust India. I am Daniel, representing Life Trust India, Coimbatore. And we are happy to just tell that this is the sixth and last webinar of this series. So far, we presented 16 presentations from different topics and all related to wildlife disease investigation webinar. And this will be the final webinar of this series. All presentations or all previous presentations are available in the YouTube, and we'll be sending the links of all the previous presentations to all of you through email as well as through WhatsApp. You're most welcome to just go and listen to watch it, and also to just refer to other people as well. This webinar is recorded, and if you have any questions, you're most welcome to just type it in the chat box, and all questions will be attended at the end of the workshop, at the end of the webinar. And once again, just welcome all of you for this webinar. Now, I request Dr. Heidi Redl, the PI of this webinar series, to introduce the presenters. Over to Heidi, please.
Thank you, Daniel. Yes, I would like to welcome everyone on behalf of Asian Elephant Support. As Daniel said, we're working with Life Trust India for these webinars. The first presentation is actually a pre-recorded presentation because the veterinarian, the presenter, is attending a workshop, but he will be logging in for the question and answer session. So we do encourage you to still put either questions in the chat or wait until the end of the presentation, and then once he logs in, you can ask him as well directly so that we can get the questions and the answers recorded for the YouTube. So the first presenter is Dr. Ravikant Khobragade. He's a senior wildlife veterinarian and head of the rapid rescue team from the Tadoba-Andhari Tiger Reserve in India. He has 13 years of field experience dealing with free-ranging wildlife. He has chemically immobilized 90 tigers, 54 leopards, and 14 elephants involved in human-elephant conflicts, or also done that on behalf of wildlife research projects and rescue. He was the first to detect EHV, the elephant endotheliotropic herpes virus, in Asian elephants in the state of Maharashtra. And he was awarded Best Wildlife Veterinarian by Sanctuary Asia Foundation. So Daniel, I'd like to request that you play Dr. Ravi's presentation. His presentation today will be on health issues of tigers and leopards in India.
Good morning. Asian Elephant Support and Life Trust India invites me as a speaker on wildlife disease investigation webinar, and my topic is wildlife health in India. So first of all, let me introduce myself. Dr. Ravikant S. Khobragade, Veterinary Officer, Wildlife, and Head Rapid Rescue Team, Tadoba-Andhari Tiger Reserve, Chandrapur, Maharashtra State, India. Today we will discuss the health issues of tigers and leopards in India. As you know all, leopards and tigers are the apex predator which plays crucial role in maintaining the balance of ecosystem. Both they regulates prey population, preventing overgrazing and ensuring the health of vegetation. The presence of these large carnivores is an indicator of a healthy and diverse ecosystem. Tigers are at the top of the food chain, controlling the population of herbivores like deer and wild boar. Protecting the tigers also benefits other species that share their habitat, contributing to overall biodiversity. Tigers' presence signifies a healthy ecosystem as they are sensitive to habitat degradation and other threats. You all of know that India has a significant tiger population with laws and conservation efforts aimed at protecting them and the habitat they inhabit. Also, leopards, as we discussed, that it's a apex predator, so it also helps to regulate the population of their prey, which can include deer, wild boar and primates. Leopards also plays a vital role in maintaining the balance of their specific ecosystem, particularly in mountainous regions. Leopards are adaptable and opportunistic hunters, able to prey on a wide variety of animals. Leopards can thrive in various habitats including forest, grasslands and even urban areas also. In essence, both the tigers and leopards are essential components of the Indian ecosystem, contributing to its biodiversity and stability. Now we will discuss the threats to the tiger and leopard's health. The main are the habitat loss, poaching, human wildlife conflict, parasitic infections, diseases and dental problems, which are impacting their survival and overall health. These threats are interconnected and contribute to the tiger's endangered status. Diseases like canine distemper virus, which can cause respiratory, gastrointestinal and neurological issues in tigers, potentially leading to the death. Rabies, which is not common as CDV, but rabies is also the serious threat to both the tigers and leopards, potentially causing neurological symptoms and death. Toxoplasmosis, this is the parasitic disease, can cause variety of symptoms including lethargy, weight loss and neurological issues in both the species. Recently, H5N1 virus, which is a strain of avian influenza also known as bird flu. Recently in India, there have been documented cases of tigers death because of H5N1, with some individuals died at Bala Saheb Thackeray Gorewada International Zoological Park in Nagpur. 3 tigers and a leopard were confirmed to have died from the H5N1 virus in this zoo. Tigers and leopards can also susceptible to other diseases such as bacterial infection, fungal infections and parasitic infections. Poaching for their fur and other body parts often leads to the injuries, including gunshot wounds and other traumas. The conflicts with humans such as retaliatory killing or accidental injuries can also lead to the injuries. Tigers and leopards may also sustain injuries from fighting with other animals or sometimes members of their own species. Now we can come to the next factor, that is stress and habitat loss. The inadequate enclosures, lack of social interaction and stress from human presence can impact the health of captive tigers and leopards also. The loss of habitat due to urbanization, deforestation and other human activities can lead to reduced genetic diversity, increased stress and increased susceptibility to diseases. Isolation of tiger and leopard population can lead to reduced genetic diversity, making them more vulnerable to diseases and environmental changes. So overall, threats like habitat loss, poaching, human wildlife conflicts significantly impact the tiger and leopard population, leading to population decline, increased vulnerability and reduced genetic diversity. These threats disrupt ecosystem, decrease prey availability and can lead to the retaliatory killing. Habitat loss and fragmentation requires tigers and leopards requires large territories and diverse habitat for hunting, breeding and survival. Due to loss of habitat and fragmentation, that is because of human activities like deforestation, agriculture and infrastructure development destroy and fragment their habitats. The consequences of this There is a reduced space and resources leading to competition of prey and increase the stress. Increased vulnerability to poaching as tigers and leopards venture into unprotected areas in search of food and territory. Potentially for inbreeding in isolated population, reducing genetic diversity and making them more susceptible to the diseases. Disrupts natural prey population, further reducing the food. Poaching and illegal trades. Poaching, particularly for their body parts like bones and skins, is the major threats for tiger and leopards also, which impact direct mortality of adult tigers and leopards, reducing reproductive potential and overall population size. Disrupts family groups, impacting the survival of cubs and kittens. Can lead to a decrease in genetic diversity within fragmented population. Third point is human-wildlife conflict. The conflict arises when they interact with humans and their livestock, often resulting in retaliatory killing by humans. Human-wildlife conflict due to human-wildlife conflict, there is an increased mortality of tiger and leopards, particularly those that engage in livestock predation. Reduce over reproductive success and population growth as a dominant individual as targeted. Creates a cycle of fear and antagonism between human and wildlife, hindering long-term conservation efforts. The changes in the temperature, precipitation and prey availability can disrupt their habitat and survival. The climate change impacts heavily because changes in the prey species distribution and abundance, impacting the food availability to them. Climate change increases the competition for resources including water and food during the period of scarcity. Climate changes increase the risk of diseases transmission and outbreaks in stressed population. The conservation efforts tackles issues like poaching, habitat loss, community conflicts through multi-phased approach. This includes anti-poaching measures, habitat protection, community involvement and research. Anti-poaching involves the stricter enforcement of laws, utilizing technology like drones and camera traps, and partnering with NGOs. Habitat protection focuses on creating and maintaining the protected areas, restoring fragmented landscapes, and mitigating populations. The community involvement involves educating the people population, providing them with economic alternatives, and providing coexistence with wildlife. The research plays a crucial role in understanding the species and ecosystem, developing effective conservation strategies, and monitoring the effectiveness of conservation efforts. The anti-poaching measures, what we have to taken: stronger law enforcement, including increased patrol, training of rangers, and strict penalties for poaching. Using advanced technology like drones, camera traps, and GPS tracking to monitor wildlife and identify the poachers. Collaboration, which deals with the working with NGOs and international conservation agencies to share the information and expertise. Habitat protection, which includes the establishing and managing the national parks, sanctuaries, and other protected areas to safeguard biodiversity. Reconnecting fragmented landscape, planting native vegetation, and restoring the degraded habitats. Pollution control, reducing pollution from industrial and agricultural sources to protect water and air quality in the wildlife habitat. Third point is community involvement, education and awareness. Educating the local communities about the importance of wildlife conservation and the benefits of coexistence. Providing the local communities with sustainable livelihood that don't rely on poaching or habitat destruction. The coexistence, the promoting the coexistence between the human and wildlife through community-based conservation programs. The research part is very important, that is conducting the research on species biology, behavior and ecology to inform conservation strategies. Studying ecosystem processes and interaction to understand how different species and habitat relate to each other. Monitoring and evaluating the effectiveness of conservation efforts and making adjustment as needed. Tigers and leopards faces various health issues including disease outbreaks, and conservation efforts focus on habitat protection, anti-poaching measures and addressing human-wildlife conflict. Diseases, threats like canine distemper virus in tiger can impact population dynamics and prey availability. Conservation programs such as Project Tiger in India aim to maintain the viable tiger population and preserve the critical habitats. The canine distemper virus has been linked to localized decline in tiger population and increased risk of extinction. Reproductive diseases, neonatal, juvenile problems, and diseases that reduce the prey abundance can also threaten the tiger population. The Project Tiger, launched in 1973 in India, which established tiger reserves and implemented anti-poaching measures. It also focuses on protecting habitat and facilitating ecological development in buffer zones and addressing human-wildlife conflict. In specifically, you can say that you can see the example of Sariska Tiger Reserve in India, which have the successful reintroduction of tigers after population wipeout due to poaching and encroachment. The Corbett Tiger Reserve, also in India, was the first of its kinds, established in 1973. Leopard specific, you can say that's similar to tigers. Leopards are susceptible to diseases and prey availability is crucial for their survival. Conservation efforts for leopard often involve the habitat protection, anti-poaching measures, and community engagement to mitigate human-leopard conflict. Basically, in that leopard case, you can have the example like that the Indian government efforts to conserve the leopards, particularly in the region facing habitat degradation and poaching, are the crucial for their long-term survival. Diseases like canine distemper virus can negatively impact the tiger and leopard population by reducing their survival and reproduction. Loss of degradation of habits, often due to human encroachment and deforestation, are major threat to both the species. Poaching for the parts of the animals, particularly in case of tiger, remains a serious threat. Conflict between human and tiger or leopards over resources, including livestock predation, can lead to retaliatory killing and further endanger population. Case strategies include the protecting habitat, reducing human-wildlife conflict, combating poaching, and promoting the sustainable tourism and agriculture. That can be used as a conservation strategies. Right now, in my sense, the India needs continued tiger and leopard conservation efforts to maintain the biodiversity, support the local communities, and promote the ecotourism, as this apex predator plays very vital role in the healthy ecosystem. These efforts includes addressing poaching, improving habitat connectivity, and mitigating human-wildlife conflict. The key points which should be noted and that should be need for the continued efforts like the tiger is apex predator role, tiger is an umbrella species, then tiger and leopard population supports the ecotourism which provides the livelihood and communities living near protected area, making them active participant in the conservation efforts. Habitat loss and fragmentation, that is very important. The habitat loss and fragmentation are major threats leading to genetic bottlenecks and reduce the biodiversity. Establishing corridors and expanding protected area is very crucial. Poaching, that is again the main threat to the Indian tiger and leopard also. Human-wildlife conflict between the tigers and humans, also in leopards also, can be resolved through mitigating strategies including early warning system, community-based solutions, sustainable livelihoods. India has the Project Tiger, which has been instrumental in tiger conservation, but ongoing efforts are essential to ensure its long-term success. The climate changes poses a growing threat to the wildlife habitat and requires adaptation strategies. The monitoring and research, continued research and monitoring are the crucial to track population, understand threats and adopt conservation strategies. So in the conclusion I can say that the continued effort are essential to protect tiger and leopard population in India, not only for their own sake but also for the health and the biodiversity of the ecosystem they inhabit and for the well-being of the communities that live alongside them. So this is for from my side. If any questions or if any queries, you can ask. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ravikant, for the wonderful presentation. And there is a question from Dr. Ravikant. Are you available?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, there's a question from Dr. Gaire. The question is, how is the status of canine distemper virus mortality of tiger and leopards in Maharashtra state?
Sir, thanks, sir. Thanks, Gary. Right now, that's a very good question because as you know, the tiger and leopard has been very high risk because of CDV in all over the world. But right now, in as such, in the CDV in our India is not so far frequent. Last many years ago, we got this cases of CDB in lions only, not in tiger later also. But right now that is controlled, and we are taking care of regarding the animal birth control program in the buffer villages, which will help to reduce the stray dog population also. That means the carrier of the particular CDV. Then again, we are taking care of that disease investigations which are found in the stray dogs during the course of animal birth control program. So that we are I think we have better check in regarding the CDV in our India for the tiger and leopards.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ravikant. And there is one more question, I think. Yeah. For helping health, care of these special animals will be very thankful. Oh, okay. Okay. That's a comment for you, Dr. Ravikanta. Yeah. That's from Prasad. Yeah. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Ravikant?
Yes, I have a question.
Please. Yeah.
So, hi, Dr. Ravi.
Hi.
I have a question for you specifically about leopards. Are leopards, in your experience, have they been more affected by CDV than tigers? I mean, we hear a lot about tigers being affected by CDV, but less about leopards. So, in your experience, what is the bigger problem for leopards?
Very good question and right question you asked, ma'am. Thank you. Basically, leopard population which are in abundance in right now, you can say it's abundance in our India, basically, and the leopards are residing very close to the human population area, and they are basically though as they are very close to the human population area now, human dominated landscape, they get the very high chances to spread the diseases from the domestic that pets and stray dog also. But that's why there is a high risk in of CDV in leopard in our area. But as compared to as compared to tiger are very they are not very close to the human dominated landscape, and they are not interested to kill the that particularly domestic or stray dogs. So there is a very less chances of transmission of diseases in the tiger, but as compared to leopard. So for this, we tiger reserve, all tiger reserve, most of the tiger reserve, we are having the animal birth control program in the particularly buffer villages where the leopard population is high, and also there is a stray dog population also high. Each and everywhere is I have taken the survey that in particular one village we got near about 20 to 30 stray dogs and pet dogs all another things. So around one village we got the 40 to 50 stray dogs population. So that dog population is going on increasing, and that will be the very good and preferable prey for the leopard. So we are we are taking care about the immunization regarding the rabies also and CDB also for the pet dogs. But for the stray dog population control, we are conducting the animal birth control program in the buffer villages, so that we can and during this animal birth control program, during the surgery, we collect the samples for the CDB and many pathogenic diseases that can be screened out. So recently we found a dog which is positive for rabies in our tiger reserve, but that is not that's why it's always dangerous, but it is not directly contact with the wild animal like tiger. So there is a very less chances, but there are more chances to contact with the leopards. That is again the big issue. But in India, in my sense, in my experience, what I think that our leopard population, which is in urban area like metro cities, like in Mumbai, it's a very good high population in leopard in the urban area of Mumbai. So there are the main prey base is particularly dogs in urban area. So there are more chances of canine distemper virus for the leopard who are residing in the urban areas, as compared to in case of rural areas, in the farmland area, village area. Though there are leopard population, though they are very close to the human dominated area, close to the human landscape, but they are preferably in the prey the small like goats, like small calf, but not even dog. Very less chances. Very last what you can option for the rural leopards to get the that dog as a prey. But in the urban, there is a very high chances they will get the main prey as a that particularly dog. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
There is one question from Dr. Palash. The question is, please tell about feline vaccination protocol, especially for big felids. And there is also another question from Dr. Azad, how to reduce these disease or protocol? Almost same question. Yeah, please.
Yeah, it's a very right question, but it's not for right forum. As I'm dealing with the free-ranging wildlife. Okay, so we cannot follow the vaccination protocol of wild animal as such in the free-ranging area. That vaccination protocol and all these things that can be done only in the confined or captivity. Means in zoo there are many that vaccination protocols which are available, and they are following the vaccination protocol for wildlife. But in case of free-ranging animal, we are not as such supposed to do. It's not possible to do the vaccination protocol like against the CDV or anti-rabies or anything. So we are just focusing to prevent the zoonotic diseases which are which will be transmitted from domestic to. So what we do in the forest area, in the free-ranging tiger reserve, we do the focus on the domestic animal vaccination programs. We will strictly follow with the help of animal husbandry department to continue or maintain the vaccination program for the domestic cattle, goats, and also stray dog and dogs also. That is in our hand only.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ravikant. Any other questions for Dr. Ravikant? If not, we will just, move on to the next presentation. I hand over the session to, now I request Heidi to just introduce the next speaker.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Dr. Ravi. Very interesting presentation. So we'll move on to the next presentation. Dr. Melody Beaumont is a wildlife veterinarian based in Laos. She's working with the Lao Conservation Trust for Wildlife and the Elephant Conservation Center to provide veterinary care to wildlife in need, survey wildlife disease, and assist in conservation research through the WildMed project. Being a strong advocate for collaboration, transparency, and knowledge sharing, she is active in projects such as the Gibbon Health Initiative, the Lao Wildlife Laboratory Network, and the Wildlife Medicine Module. So today's presentation is on the role of wildlife rescue centers in wildlife disease investigation. So I would like to invite Dr. Beaumont to start her presentation.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. So thank you so much for that introduction. So I'll skip this slide where I introduce myself. But yeah, I work in Laos. I work on different projects, and our main activity is wildlife rehabilitation. Of course, with a conservation focus, but always the primary activity we do is rehabilitating injured, diseased, or displaced wildlife and trying to get them back out into the wild. And I'm sure everyone is aware there are arguments against wildlife rehabilitation. And one of the main ones you will hear is that it's a lot of resources invested in individual animals, and those individual animals don't necessarily have a high conservation value. And another one of the arguments is if it's ethical to bring these animals into captivity, even if it's temporarily. But there's also a lot of arguments for wildlife rehabilitation. And first, that we have a moral responsibility, as a lot of the damage is done by human activity. Second, that individuals do matter when we are talking about endangered or critically endangered species. Or then a big thing wildlife rehabilitation centers can do is education. There needs to be a place for the public to call, to resort to when they find injured wildlife, when they are concerned. The public members that are concerned about this issue need a place to go. The government, the authorities need a place to take the animals when they enforce the law. So it is important that rehab centers exist. And I'm not even starting to talk about all the education projects and potential that is there. But one major thing I want to focus on today is the access we have to wildlife that almost nobody else has. How many people get a wild gibbon on their table or a pangolin? To do research on these animals, it's very difficult. To capture a wild gibbon is very difficult. To all the logistics, the resources, the permits, the ethical concerns. There's so many barriers. But in rescue centers, in the setting we work, we get these animals through our center every day. And there's so much potential. We can detect factors that are outside of the animals, so problem factors. If we get a lot of electrocutions, we are able to identify that that's causing harm to that species. We may be able to identify environmental aspects or social aspects that are impacting wildlife. But we also have access to the individual itself. We can collect samples, we can do disease surveillance, we can do genetic studies. There's so much potential. And if we look at ZIMS, I don't know if you have heard about it. It's a software used by a lot of zoos internationally, and more rescue centers are using it. And here are some statistics from ZIMS that all the animals that are currently recorded in ZIMS institution, most of them are least concern. But if you look at LCTW, this rescue center in Laos, most of the animals they hold are critically endangered. If we look at species in ZIMS, most of species, so the dark parts of the bars, are not at risk by IUCN classification. If we look at LCTW, the majority of the species they have are at risk. So rescue centers do get a lot of animals that have conservation value. And then if we dig a bit deeper, this is again an extract from ZIMS. If we look at this species, the Lao langur, LCTW is the only place in the world or within ZIMS users that holds this species in captivity. It means there's virtually no information on this species out there. So we have such a unique access and so much potential to detect, to collect so much information. And if we look at clinical cases only, so passive disease surveillance, we already detect a lot. This is an avian influenza case in a civet, so it's a spillover event. It's very significant. This small jackal was found in a protected area, but he died of distemper. Mentioned earlier, it's a concern for wildlife. We've detected melioidosis cases, we've detected drug-resistant bacteria, and this is only on clinical cases, so this is passive disease surveillance. But there's so much more potential that we're still not tapping into, and a lot of centers are not tapping into. I would say more than so much potential, there's so much wasted potential. And then we have to ask why. The answer is very easy. We don't have money, we don't have time, we don't have the resources, facilities. Let's say we have to freeze samples. It's rare that people have access to a freezer or stable electricity. And in the end, we are veterinarians. Our main job is to treat the animal, and our main goal working in rescue centers is that we're doing the treatment and rehabilitation of these animals. We're not primarily scientists, we're not primarily epidemiologists, and we cannot be everything. But there is a lot we can do. So first, let's look how we can maximize data collection without investing a lot of resources. Just in our daily clinical practice, what can we do? One thing we can do is sample banking. And this is something we are doing currently at every project I work with. Every time we have an animal and we take a blood sample, we freeze some serum. It takes 5 minutes and we have it. And over the years, we've accumulated hundreds of serum samples. If you don't have a freezer, you can do dried blood spots. You don't need a freezer, you just need filter paper. You put a drop of blood. These can be kept, as long as they stay dry, they can be kept up to 5 years. They can be used for disease surveillance in the future. So much potential for genetics. You can do hair samples. Hair samples can be used for, again, genetics. They can be used for pollution, how do you say it? Pesticide detection, for endocrinology. Don't need a fridge. Takes 10 seconds to collect a hair sample, pop it in a bag. And there's tissue samples. Formalin doesn't need a freezer. Solutions like RNA later are really expensive, but we can do this with low resources. Just alcohol 70%, ethanol 70%. A tissue sample stored in alcohol can be used for so many purposes, from genetic studies to disease surveillance. There's so much potential. And then, not speaking specifically about disease, about infectious disease, there's so much data we can record. So we can record sex, color patterns, dental records, biometrics. And in all of this, one really, really, really important point is we need to be consistent with how we collect this data. If we're going to collect samples, if we're going to collect data, it needs to be done properly. If we collect a measurement and every time it's measured, it's in a different way, then that data is useless. So it's really important to have protocols, and this is something you make once and then you can just apply it. So we take biometric data on every primate, and we do it the same way every time. And we have these very detailed instructions. So if different vets or different staff members take the measurements, they will use the same landmarks. They will take the same measurements. And this goes for everything. These are our instructions for sample storage. We have instructions on how to label, what information to place on the label, because again, we can collect the sample, we can collect it properly, and then if we don't label it properly, if we're not able to identify where that sample came from, it's worthless. It's really important to have all these details lined out and make sure that the whole team is trained on this. This is an example of a necrocy protocol for elephants. So it's we can use other protocols to inspire us and decide what we want to do and what is possible for us to do. So this protocol has 3 pages of suggested organs to sample for histopathology. But of course, not everyone can do that. That is very time consuming. But we can say, us as a center, every time an elephant dies, we will collect liver, kidney, spleen, lung, and heart, 5 samples. It takes 15 minutes, pop them in formalin, they go into the sample bank. So those are all things we can do. These are some of the pictures we take. So these are identification pictures. We always take them for every animal that goes through a health check. We take these standardized pictures, and it may seem that they're not very useful, but in the long run, they are. And this is, again, something very quick, takes no time, takes no resources, you just need a phone. And if you compare here, this is the importance of doing it properly and always in the same way. That first picture cannot really be used, not for identification, not for any color patterns, or it's at a weird angle. The animal seems longer than it is in real life. But that second picture, that's a good picture. And then we've now reached the stage where we have enough pictures where we have, for example, dental progression. We can see dental wear. We can see the sequence of eruption in different species. We always take genital pictures, which may seem really weird, but it's surprisingly hard to sex some species, and there is very little information out there. But now we're forming this database of genital pictures, and we can use this to then train new staff members, share with other centers on how to properly sex the animals. So these are very simple things that can have a lot of impact, and they don't require a lot of time. They don't require a lot of resources. Something that is really, really important is record keeping. Let's say we take these pictures and then they are on somebody's phone and then that person leaves. We took them for nothing. We need to know where things are. We need to make sure they're recorded properly, that we can look back at it. So things we need to think about when we decide on record keeping is what language we're recording in. Are we doing paper files? Are we doing digital? Are we using any software? You can just do Excel databases or Google Sheets. There's software like Zims that is really useful. What is important is that it's clear, it's consistent, and it's really nice when it's searchable. And again, you don't need very fancy tool to make something searchable, because of course Zims is amazing and I highly recommend it, but it is not free. But things like Google Drive are free. So this is how we keep our pictures. Every time an animal gets on the table, pictures get taken. Whoever took the pictures uploads them onto the animal's file. And you see here we have rules for animal pictures. It's against standardizing things. And these rules specify that every folder has the animal ID number, then the scientific name, and then a house name or any relevant identifying features. And why is this important? Because this creates a searchable database. So now if I search Mamascus, I see all my gibbons. If I search for gibbon genitalia, I see all my gibbon genital pictures, and so on. So we're creating a searchable database of relevant information on species where there's very little information out there with very little resources. But what now? As I said earlier, I have hundreds of serum samples in my freezer. I still don't have time. I don't have a second freezer. I'm not a researcher or an epidemiologist. It's not my primary goal. And for some species, I do have very small amount of samples. There's not much scientifically relevant that I can do with 5 ferret badger serum samples. It's not a large enough number. So what else is really important? It's collaboration. And I know this is starting to sound like a TED talk, but it really, really is. And I want to talk about Laos as an example. So there's not many organizations working in conservation. So on this side of the screen, these are organizations working in wildlife rescue. On the other side, you see some organizations that are involved in conservation and more field work, policy making, forensics. And at one point, we all sat together and we created the Wildlife Health Laboratory Network. And it's very informal. And basically, we just sat together and we decided to communicate, be transparent, share resources, and try to take actions that would last for the long run. So not do a short project, a 3-month project, and then when the funding ends, it never continues. We're trying to do things that will last. So we had a meeting where we looked at what we do, what we have, what capacity do we have, what capacity do we want, and what is priority. We identified the capacity that we had in country. This is 2023, and it was very, 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 very little. We had almost no labs to do animal disease specific testing. We couldn't look at any turtle or tortoise pathogens or even primate diseases, only if shared with humans. There was very, very little capacity. But the second thing we did was look at what each of us wants to focus on. And we all have different areas we're looking to develop. And for example, you see the ECC, they have an endocrinology lab. It doesn't make sense to make a second endocrinology lab in Laos because even the one at the ECC right now, it's not being used 100% of the time. So it doesn't make sense to duplicate resources. It makes sense to share resources. And that's what we're trying to do. So we share what we have. We all focus on different areas, and that way we're developing faster. And we also are now working on a joint sample bank. So what I was talking about earlier about only having 5 samples of one species, I may have 5, but Frida Bears may have 7, and WildMed or the ECC can have 10. And suddenly we have a bigger number. So what we're doing now is we're joining our protocols and our SOPs. We're all taking the same samples. That's the goal, that we will all take the same samples in the same way. We will store them the same way, and then we can share them for different research projects. And this all sounds very nice, right, in theory, but does it work? It does work. We've achieved so much since we started collaborating more. So this is an example. It's genetics, but I think it's a really good example of the collaboration. So we had these crocodiles, 85 crocodiles, and we did not know if they were hybrids or if they were pure Siamese. If they were pure Siamese, they're very important in terms of conservation, but if they're hybrids, they're not. And there was no capacity in country to do the genetic testing. Exporting samples with CITES is currently very, very difficult because of the situation in Laos. And for years, we've been wanting to test these crocodiles. So what did we do? We collected the samples. Two organizations collected the samples. Now we stored them in this -80 freezer from a different partner, because we don't have one, but they have one, and they had free space. Then IRD, another partner that are more focused on lab work, they helped with the DNA extraction, the lab space. And then we had an external partner to do all the bioinformatics and everything. So by joining forces, we were able to determine that 88% of our crocodiles were pure Siamese. We were able to separate out the individuals that were hybrids, and we now have a very successful breeding program where we're hatching these baby crocodiles. They're being released back into the wild. So we made it, and this is really great. And we have many more examples. This is not the only one. IRD with the ECC did a study on non-invasive TB screening. At LCTW, we collect samples. So every animal that came through for more than a year, every mammal would get nasal, oral, rectal swabs. It took 1 minute to take this, and then we would just send them off to IRD, and they did all the lab stuff, the storage, the testing. So that way we were able to do COVID-19 surveillance in wild mammals in hundreds of samples, and it took very little of our resources, of our time. With a malaria study in fecal samples, we're keeping ticks. So any tick I find, I pop them in alcohol, we keep them, and then we send them off to this laboratory partner. There have been Asian elephant genetic population surveys with these partnerships, endocrinology studies, currently working on gibbon speciation. So again, samples are coming from one place, another place is doing the sample processing, and then we send it off externally. So I think this is a really good example of how you can do so much with very little resources. And we work in NGOs, we work as nonprofits. There is no competition. We're all working for the same thing. We're all working for the same goals. We're not competing over anything. And when we work together, we can achieve so much more and so much faster. So we're fully transparent on what we're trying to develop to make sure another partner of the network doesn't develop the same capacity. So we're not wasting resources. We share what we have. So if we have capacity, we don't keep it just for ourselves. We share it with every other partner in the network. We apply for funding together, and it's actually more successful to get funding awarded when you apply together with multiple organizations. And we're really focusing on establishing capacity that is going to last. And this has led not only in terms of laboratory and disease investigation, but this collaboration is becoming more and more solid. And we've done other projects as well. So we've done, IRD did a parasitology training where multiple of the members attended and benefited from. And this is one of my favorite projects, is we developed a wildlife medicine module between the three rescue centers in the country with the National University. It's now part of the curriculum, which means every veterinary student of the country goes through this program. And it's a 2-week intensive program where they get hands-on practical classes on wildlife, on conservation. Here you can see a class on crocodiles. We go through necropsy, One Health, biosecurity, and we've actually hired already 4 people out of this program are now working in conservation, 3 of them in rescue centers, and 1 of them with the One Health project at WCS. So it's really successful, and it's just so great to be able to do this. So yeah, I think the take-home message for me is focus on what you can do, not on what you can't do. Because there is a lot we can do, even if there is no lab and there is no time and there is no money. There's so much we can do. And the main thing to make it work is to be organized, have protocols in place, do things consistently the same way, proper record keeping, and collaborate, talk to each other, to get more capacity, to join forces to be able to achieve these goals. And this is not, I gave this example about Laos, and I think we're really doing great work, especially considering how limited our resources are. But this also happens on a regional level, and I'm just going to pitch the Gibbon Health Initiative. So it's run by VIEW, funded by ARCAS, and the goal is it's the same thing. It's to join all rescue centers, all in situ centers that work with gibbons, and communicate, share resources, share knowledge. So if anyone works with gibbons and is not yet part of the network, please reach out, because we would be happy to have you join. And yeah, I think that's all for today. Thank you very much. I hope this was useful.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Melody Bowman, for the wonderful talk. It's a great work that you are doing at Laos Conservation Trust for Wildlife and also ECC. And I have one question, that is, I would like to just know more about ZIMS, throw some lights on ZIMS and what are the basic, how does it work? That will help us to know more about ZIMS. Yeah.
Okay, I can share my screen again and give you a quick walkthrough. So I'll just log in. Yeah. Sometimes a little bit slow to log in. So basically, it's an online database. It's designed for wildlife, or captive wildlife, and they are now expanding to include also rehabilitation, post-release monitoring, and all of that. And let me just log in. So the big advantage is that all of your information is in the same place. And so I can see all my animals here. They're very cute loading screens. Let me just go. Just 1 second. So you put all of your animal files in here, and you can record any information that you can imagine. ZIMS has a place for it. So I'm going to put Calypso. I'll just pull up a random record. My internet's been very slow. So this is the animals file. The microchips in here, all the biometrical measurements we took are in here. There's weights in here. Then you can create a weight graph, so you can see the animal's weight evolution. You can compare weight evolution of different animals. You can see all the enclosures they've been in. Then there's medical records that are also very detailed, where there's separate fields for anesthesia prescriptions, if there are any adverse effects or anything, lab results, everything goes in there. And what is really great is that all this information will contribute to worldwide reference values. So while this loads, there's these resources, so medical resources. So I can look at drug usage extracts. So let's say I want to see, can I give cimetidine to an elephant and what is the dosage? I can actually check on ZIMS and see if people have used it, what dosage, if there have been any adverse effects. And so let's see, wait, LFS Maximus. So again, it's all about data sharing. None of the records, it doesn't link back to your institution, so nobody will be able to say, oh, that specific place they gave cimetidine and the animal died. But what you get is sort of a statistical overview. So I can see here cimetidine was given orally, at most people are giving around 2 milligrams per kilogram. And then if there were any side effects, he would show that in different colors. So that way I can see the dose range that people have been using, the route they have been using, if twice a day, if once a day, if there's any adverse effects, it will show up. The same way you can look up test results. So I can look, let's do again, elephant. And for Asian elephant, let's do Indian elephant. So you can actually look at reference ranges based on the data that all the ZIMS institutions are entering. So here you have a red blood cell count range based on 2,500 samples. Obviously, it always needs to be used in a critical way because this data is not being validated and there is a certain degree of error, but it is very useful, especially when you're working with species where there's no published information. And you can also filter this, so you can filter this to females only or to only the continent you're working in or the country you're working in. We have hematology, chemistry, all of that. So I showed you, so these are the resources. This is the animal records, and there's space for observations, any behavioral observations, anything like that. Then the medical records. So for example, here for this animal, on this day, she had an anesthesia event. Everything about the anesthesia will be here. All the medication she got, the dosages, if there were any adverse effects, anything like that. Any samples are here. The results of the testing, if the samples were tested, are in here. Any treatments, everything goes in, just like medical records anywhere else. The only difference is that the data is going to contribute to this worldwide pool of data. And then another module that I find very useful is the sample storage module. So actually from the medical records, let's say I take a sample, I can move this sample to storage, you see here, and then within ZIMS, I can have a sample storage, so a biobank database. So I can actually look up I can look up, let's do a gibbon, any gibbons, any samples. Let's see which gibbon samples we have in storage. So now I can see all the gibbon samples I have in storage, the type of sample, I can see where they are. So I have this kidney sample that is in the storage cabinet in the hospital. So you can have your whole sample data bank. You can just, it's a big database, and it's very useful. And yeah, was that good as a introduction?
Yeah, great, wonderful. How to access it? Is there any username and password? How to be a member of it?
So it is paid, which is the downside. It is run by an NGO, but it is paid. they do have a sliding scale. So for organizations in developing countries that are non-profits, the annual price is much, much, much lower than for a big zoo in the United States, for example. So it's basically emailing them, and they'll ask a set of questions and then tell you in which category you fall for the price scale.
Thank you, Melody. Heidi has a question, I think. Dr. Heidi?
Yes. Yep. Hi, Melody. I have a question specifically about the TB testing that you do with the elephants at the center, ECC. So what type of testing do you do? And you test just the elephants or also the mahouts or the staff?
At this moment, so the study I referred to was a pilot study to trial non-invasive testing. So it was with fecal samples. The thing is, we didn't have any positives, so we need some positive cases to trial if it would even work. But at the moment, we're not doing any routine TB screening. Yeah, we aim to,
So
but
you-
we don't have the full capacity yet to do so.
Okay. So you don't do like trunk wash cultures or things like that. So you tried to do the fecal, did you do cultures?
We did, yeah, but it was a one-time study. Yeah.
Okay.
And so
did you do just the
yeah, we
elephants or
don't
also
have
the mahouts?
the elephants and the mahouts.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any TB screening process in Laos for people where the mahouts could kind of come under that particular screening process?
There is a program that does nationwide screening with Gene Expert, but you have to fit the criteria. So you have to have certain symptoms to be eligible for testing. The other option would be chest X-rays, or we have a way of doing the skin test. So it's definitely it's something we're working on. We're hoping to, by the end of this year, to start to do it regularly.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
There's a question from Dr. Palash. How to join a program at Laos? That's a question.
What do you mean to join as in a visitor, as a
maybe as a volunteer, maybe
or to join the network?
Volunteering or as an intern in any of the programs that you have?
Yeah. They just reach out to us, email us. We're all happy to host people and to share knowledge. I'll leave my email in the chat as well, and feel free to email me.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions for Dr. Melody? Yeah. If there is any question, if there is any more question, maybe we'll email you, and we can just circulate with all the members of the group. Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Melody, for the wonderful presentation. It's a great work that you're just doing there in Laos. And once again, I just thank you on behalf of Asian Elephant Trust and Life Trust India. Thank you. Now over to Heidi.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, for having me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It was very interesting. Very interesting. Great work you're doing. So our next presentation, I believe the presenter is now online, is going to be a little bit of a different topic now. Dr. Claire Petros is a sea turtle veterinarian and a biologist, and also the founder of Sea Turtle Rescue Alliance. So she is currently undertaking a PhD at Oxford University in behavior change and turtle conservation in the Maldives. And today's presentation is going to be about Sea Turtle Rescue Alliance, an Indian Ocean perspective. Dr. Claire, if I believe you're online, I would like to invite you to present now if you're ready.
Good morning. Just
Good morning.
Yeah, just share my screen. Okay, just let me know if you can see.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, brilliant. Okay. I'll just give you a little bit of a hello and let you know who I am and sort of how I've got into sea turtle work as a vet. So I'm originally from London, and I spent most of my almost decade now working with sea turtles out of vet school. And the IOC is particularly important to me because my first job and my main job since starting as a vet has been working in the Maldives. So we set up a rescue centre for sea turtles with the Olive Ridley project. And that is sort of how I started really kind of getting very focused in on this species, both for the veterinary side, which is this wildlife medicine charity that we're involved in, Sea Turtle Rescue Alliance, and also now, as Heidi just mentioned, for my PhD, which is looking at a bit more about human behaviour and also trying to conserve sea turtles from more of a consumptive point of view as opposed to a medical point of view. So if you've got any questions about life changing from veterinary clinical to veterinary research or wildlife conservation research at the end, please do ask. So this presentation is just going to cover what we do in Sea Turtle Rescue Alliance and what we're hoping to achieve as a relatively young charity. But we basically noticed that there was a little bit of a gap in terms of what medical knowledge was out there for treating sea turtles around the world. And obviously sea turtles are a global species. So we'll just touch on that as well throughout the presentation. So I'm hoping to cover a little bit of everything. So a little bit about turtles, if you're not that well aware of the species or the 7 species that we have. And also the sort of work that we've been doing recently, mostly in the Indian Ocean. Okay, so the point of this charity, like I mentioned, was having worked for a number of years in a rescue centre in the Maldives. I was often contacted through social media, so a lot of the times on Instagram or Facebook, with questions related to veterinary care of sea turtles. And as a relatively young vet and a young clinical facilities that we had, we were, asking other experts for support and making sure that we were trying to give this kind of concept of the gold standard, which we know as veterinarians isn't necessarily all that possible, but to give the best possible care, research, evidence-based from our rescue centre, and make sure if we were giving any advice, we wanted to make sure it was working. So once I realised that there was quite a big community out there of vets that were already treating turtles, vets that wanted to get into treating turtles, I realised that there was this niche to help train vets and also improve the rescue care and rehabilitation facilities and generally raise awareness of turtle welfare, because as a wildlife species in rehabilitation or rescue, obviously want to minimise the amount of time that they're in rehabilitation and try and get them fixed up as quickly as possible and released. That was the ultimate goal of the Sea Turtle Rescue Alliance. So how are we going to do that? So the last few years, basically it was kind of a lockdown project, as many as you might kind of understand. It was something that, when we were stuck and I was stuck in Bristol in the UK, I wasn't able to travel with work as much as I had previously been. But I was getting a lot of emails, a lot of contact, a lot of FaceTime for patients that were around the world that wanted some support for their treatment. So we wanted to create this network and this collaboration where we could provide a service of vets that have got extensive knowledge of how best to treat turtles. We also realised it was a great platform to educate and do similar talks like this one. So online training and ideally at that time, and then obviously extend it when lockdown started to relax. We went in person to do some clinical training, so hands-on skills all around the world, really, where turtles were being treated. And then the idea would be that we would have this patient management software. So it's a cloud-based platform, which is sort of a work in progress, because we've realized that there's a lot of turtles being treated in lots of rehab centers across the world. But that really valuable data, how long they're in care for, what medications are being used, what are their injuries looking like, what did they come in the first place? So all of that information was desperately needed. So we're currently trying to crowdsource or fund patient management software specifically for turtle care, for turtle rescue centres. So we've got a varied team, a global team. The vets themselves are myself, Dr. Max, who now works in Saudi, Dr. Ale, who is an Italian vet that's working in the Philippines, but actually more of a shark vet, so shark manta conservation with the Lamave team. Dr. Mariana, who has spent a few years at Olive Ridley Project as well as the resident vet. And then obviously we've got some trustees, Ocean Care being a big part of how the rescue centre, the charity, was set up. And they are a Swiss NGO that support ocean-based wildlife conservation projects. So the idea behind becoming a member of STRA would be to be an individual member if you were a vet, or a sea turtle specialist, so potentially running a rehab centre, and where we have access to educational materials, updates, papers, and whether they want to actually get involved with training workshops, depending on where they are. And we also have affiliated members. So we're trying to get as many rescue centres to join the charity as possible. And that's partly to be showcases of how well rescue rehab centres can actually run, how they're running, whether it's NGO-led or government-led or funding crowdsourced, and try and improve those facilities if needed, and also give them access to training and resources if they require it. And also to give them some global recognition and support, because there might be some rescue centres in the same country that are able to facilitate and support other rescue centres that they didn't actually know even existed. So creating this kind of global map of rescue centres for turtles. We also, obviously, mainly the main reason, like I said, we set up was to enhance capacity for veterinarians. So that was providing from anything from online lectures. We had, especially during 2022, we had a series of medical lectures that are all on YouTube. So talking to other vets, not just clinical vets, research vets too, about their work. And we're starting that up again this year as well. So if you've got anyone that you feel like you want to put up for giving a talk, please do get in touch with me as well. And we want to make sure that, we're kind of keeping up to date with medicine, because this field is an emerging field as well. The things that we're learning and how to do with sea turtles is just growing daily. So we want to make sure that, we're providing the best possible advice. And also things from the photo libraries, examples of wounds, of healing wounds, of examples of reasons why turtles were admitted in the first place. And then, like I said, providing these in-person regional workshops. So that photo at the top there was in Bali, just over a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, where we actually had a case of, I think it was 19 turtles that were confiscated from poaching, that Dr. Max there is just doing a clinical exam assessment with the vets that were on the training course. And at the bottom there, it was Bandit Archer. Last year, we went to final year veterinary students, university, to teach them how to read bloods and do a physical exam and do a post-mortem with sea turtle. So lots of in-person training is key. And then part of what we offer, obviously, as well, is the basic equipment to start to study turtles in a better clinical way. So providing microscopes, centrifuges, ultrasounds, and Dopplers. So that was the team in Bali receiving the kit. And just to point out the really exciting aspect of this kind of concept of this network is that Dr. Nowell there, who's the lovely lady in pink on the right, she's actually now, having been one of the trainee vets at the Bali Rescue Centre that took part in this training, is now the current resident vet in the Maldives. So from Bali to the Maldives, creating this network of vets that have had experience, have had training, that are now working in other countries to protect turtles. So the network itself is really working, and that's really wonderful to see. So like I said, a little bit of a brief background in sea turtles. We've got 7 species: green, olive, hawksbill, loggerhead, kemps, flatback and leatherbacks. India has almost, 5, if not 6 of these species, five of these species, with I think most famously the arabadas, the olive ridley mass nesting events. But like I said, in the Maldives, we also have 5 of these species, just not the kemps and the flatback. So we're very fortunate for where we are to have so many of these species actually surrounding the waters, and often we see them as patients. So in the Maldives, we saw 4 of those 5. We don't see the leatherback very often. It's quite rare to see in the Maldives, and quite luckily, because given that they can be 2+ meters, they're quite a difficult species to treat in rehabilitation. But olive ridleys are actually one of the smallest species of sea turtle, so it makes for a very good patient, very compliant. Hawksbills tend to be a little bit more wild when in captivity. And we often see greens, but I'll walk you through the different reasons why we also see different species. And really interestingly, Mediterranean is also known for the loggerheads as well as the Americas, but we don't tend to see loggerheads very much in the Maldives. But we found one small patient of ours kind of post-hatching, so it was interesting to see that species there. Now, they are obviously wonderfully adapted for the sea. They've basically been around since the time of the dinosaurs. They have an exceptionally streamlined bodies, and unlike other turtle species, they can't pull their flippers or the back flippers into their carapace, so they're constantly on the outside as well as their head. They've got the same sort of anatomy as your human hand, let's say, it's just elongated along the flipper. Their front flippers are obviously used for propulsion, for swimming very quickly. They're actually very incredible swimmers in the water. And the back flippers are used to sort of be like the rudders to steer the boat, as it were, and also for nesting, so digging out that beautiful nesting hole. And they have that flattened shell, so all of their rib cage is sort of flattened with the carapace being on top, and the different scutes are a way to identify different species. And also to note that the scales on their face are unique to each individual turtle, so it's a way to identify individual turtles. So the scales on the left side of the face are different to that on the right side of the face, and there are programs that many NGOs now use, organizations, to ID the turtles, to have a population number, which is completely hands-off, is just to get those photos. And now even using tools like AI, we can actually confirm how many turtles we're seeing just from photos themselves, which is really important. They have some pretty cool adaptations for living at sea. They obviously are able to dive and hold their breath for a very long time. They can hold their breath for sort of 7 to 8 hours. But when they're swimming or eating, it's more usually sort of about 20 minutes at a time. They have these specialized salt glands behind their eyes that can excrete the salt from the seawater. So when they're eating, they're not obviously accumulating all that salt. They have cardiac shunting as well. So they're able to they ensure they're longer diving, conserve their oxygen. They've actually got very good vision for underwater as well. And they can use magnetic fields, light cues, and water chemistry as well to find out where they are. And they're famously known for sort of returning to their nesting beaches, or nesting sites, I should say, because in the Maldives, you've got sort of 1,200 islands, and it's not necessarily true that each turtle is coming back to the exact same beach that it was born on, but within a few kilometers, they tend to return to where they were born. Sorry. So the IOC has a number of threats, and unfortunately, the majority of these threats are man-made. The biggest one really is sort of both fisheries bycatch. So we have different types of nets, so gill nets, long lines, and purseines. And I know specifically on the Indian coastline, there's been a lot of bycatch, so lots of wash-ups of turtles, especially with such a big season of the Arabada this year. So of course, the more turtles that are nesting, the more sadly we're going to have interactions with the fishing industry. And we often find them drowned and floating, and therefore beached on the beaches. We also have marine pollution, and this is the main reason why I got involved with sea turtles in the first place. So in the Maldives, unfortunately for them, the olive ridleys especially, sort of 95% of our patients get entangled in these ghost nets. So they're discarded or abandoned fishing nets that have sort of become these massive conglomerations of netting, and it's not just nets, it's plastics, it's all sorts of rubbish, and these turtles see it as a floating kind of fad, like a fish aggregating device, and they'll go and take a look at what's up there, and potentially a quick easy meal, and then get entangled in these nets. So often these turtles are in a terrible state because they've been without food, unfloating on the surface for weeks, if not longer. So that's the main reason why we see turtles in the Maldives. Then we've also got, general threats of plastics, chemicals, oil spills, and heavy metals. Habitat loss is obviously something else that's man-made. We tend to obviously massively develop our coastal regions, whether that's for tourism, for beaches, or which includes light pollution as well. So that disorientates turtles when they come up to nest. And also with sea level rising, particularly poignant in the Maldives, where I think the highest point is under 2 meters. So, a species that relies on nesting on beaches is going to struggle if those sea levels continue to rise. So they're really, unfortunately, tacked on land when they're nesting and in the water when they're swimming and eating. And also the other threats that we can often see as boat strikes. So we can very, very clearly see propeller marks on their carapace, predation of hatchlings. That tends to be obviously other species, but sadly, because they're quite cute, I think most people have seen how beautiful it is to watch a nest of baby hatchlings go out to the sea. They're often kept as pets as well in many countries that have nesting turtles. And then, of course, the illegal egg and turtle meat harvesting around the world that still sadly goes on despite many levels of protection. So as I mentioned, the fish's bycatch is basically the leading cause of mortality, specifically for the threats of the turtles in the Indian Ocean. So there's an estimate of sort of roughly 52,000 turtles that are caught every year, with long lines, that's gill nets, sorry, I should say. Long lines, 3,500, purseines, 250, with green turtles being the species more commonly found sort of in the coastal regions, making up most of those catches. Whereas, like I said, the ghost gear tends to be the olive ridleys, and that is because they have different sort of niches in the sea. So the greens tend to stick near the coast. They obviously eat seagrass, whereas the olive ridleys are these sort of ocean wanderers that go from deep sea grounds to nesting grounds, and get caught sort of out in the deep. So different species have different threats depending on the different fishery types, which is interesting to note. So pollution and its impact isn't the next sort of one I mentioned. So plastics, I mean, this can come in all sorts, obviously entanglement like we've discussed, but also ingestion. We've had many patients at our rescue centre that are with us for a number of weeks, if not months, and continuously they're pooping out different types of plastic, colourful plastic. They, like I said, they had quite good vision, so they can see things that are quite colourful, and plastic obviously can be. And so they tend to eat things that are palatable and colourful. And unfortunately, the plastic gets a biofilm when it spends a lot of time in the sea. So it smells like food, it looks like food, and it often gets mistaken for food. Especially those blue clear plastic bags can even look like jellyfish from a distance. So turtles can often be found with stomachs filled with those. Oil spills, there are a lot of cases, unfortunately, with these big tankers running aground or leaking, where the turtles have obviously come up to air to breathe and been covered in oil. And then there's obviously heavy metals, so runoffs from agriculture, from farming. And even in the US, we have this, emerging, well, it's not emerging anymore, but it's the fibropapillomatosis. So these huge growths that are coming, and they think that is linked to agricultural fertilizers as well. So linked to other diseases, reducing their immune response and suppression, and then therefore it is spreading as well. And it has been seen, I think, in the Seychelles, if I believe correct. So it's spreading across the oceans. It's not kind of just kept over to the Americas anymore. And I think there's even been some cases reported in the Philippines as well. So, it is becoming a global disease, and that's being much better understood from where it kind of originated. But it is just to note that these species obviously travel vast distances, and these diseases therefore can spread. Here are a couple of examples of these ghost nets that I had described. So as you can see, it's a mixture of different types of netting. There's ropes, there's actual kind of plastic netting, and then there's different sort of floating devices so that it kind of becomes a fish aggregating device, perhaps. And that bottom right there was one of my first patients that was actually entangled and washed up on the exact island that the rescue centre that I was working in, the Maldives. So it was quite a large adult olive ridley female that had been entangled for quite some time. And the most common injuries in these situations are flipper injuries that often, sadly, either have already been amputated or require amputation because of the extent of the injury. Because turtles, like we said, with their front propellers are exceptionally strong. Plastic obviously is ridiculously hardy. So when you get the combination of the two with weeks of starvation, turtles will really try and escape that net and break through skin, muscle, and bone. We see many times where the bone's been completely broken through kind of just the exertion to escape these nets. So it's a really not a very pleasant way for the turtles to be found. And these are a few of the examples of the injuries. So also neck ligatures, partial loss of different flippers, different stages of loss, all the way down to just bone, which eventually actually we've seen auto amputations as well. So they've come to the clinic with almost nothing remaining from being entangled. And a byproduct of entanglement, well, there's also other reasons why there is buoyancy, but it's definitely a huge byproduct that we see in entanglements is this situation where a turtle has been entangled for a very long time and they're unable to dive because of these tears in their lungs that we think are from the physical exertion of trying to escape the nets. So we can actually see the air, especially with using the radiographs to see where the air is sitting. They can also have other reasons for air accumulation, so gastrointestinal blockages, like I mentioned before about the plastic ingestion. And obviously, this is a really dangerous situation for a turtle to have because in order to eat and swim, they need to be under the water and they can't obviously be spending too much time at the surface because of risk of being hit, of actually spending too much time at the surface is bad for them because of the sunlight and dehydration and ultimately not being able to eat at the bottom and just show normal behaviours. So we tend to have a lot of our patients, especially in the Maldives, that have buoyancy disorders, and sometimes they can heal quite quickly if it's a small lung tear, and sometimes they can be with us for months, and we actually put weights on their carapace to try and help and support them from being lower in the water and helping them to dive down and eat. Depending on where you are in the world, there's also a lot of head trauma or blunt force trauma. Like I mentioned before, boat strikes have these clear propeller marks. You can see that in the photo on the right. So yeah, clear propeller marks being hit by a boat. But these head injuries are quite interesting, depending on where you are, like I mentioned. So for Greece, for example, the fishermen are in competition, they believe, with turtles for fish. And so they don't have a particularly good relationship with loggerheads especially. And so we often find a lot of these quite severe blunt force traumas to the head, but whether it's lucky for this animal or not, but the brain is relatively well encased in quite a thick skull. So even these quite severe injuries, especially around the eyes and the top of the head, as much as it looks like, if that had been a cat or a dog, there's no way that these animals would survive. Whereas with sea turtles, they are surprisingly resilient, even with these severe injuries, and with a bit of support and care, can actually heal up relatively well. And a lot of these head injury cases have been released from Greece and even followed up with GPS, with scans, with satellite tags. So we know that actually they're able to survive these quite traumatic injuries. And then there's also other examples of keeping turtles as pets and mishandling them and having other sort of traumatic injuries as well, which is like this, the illegal pet trade. That middle photo there is the young loggerhead that we found at the rescue centre in the Maldives. So just to prove that there have been some there. So almost everywhere in the world now, obviously keeping turtles as pets is illegal. And it's also one of the things that we need to be very careful about when we discuss and treat turtles in rescue facilities, because there are a lot of places that are keeping turtles for, let's say, display purposes, so longer than they need to be kept, for tourism or private aquariums and hotels, that sort of thing. Whereas the charity really wants to sort of focus on those that are needing medical help that are then going to be released as quickly as possible. And then a little bit about a legal take. So despite obviously all these laws and legislations from CMS to CITES, traditional use, obviously turtles have been part of communities for many generations, and taking eggs or taking proportions of the eggs has been something that has been more of a kind of cultural, historical take. And that's something that I think a lot of countries are really working hard to conserve turtles in this way, but there's still a lot of scope for improving that. And one of the things that it has massively benefited from the ban and from kind of more awareness is this sort of jewellery trade. So the hawksbill shell, which you can see at the bottom right there, those beautiful bangles, and all sorts of jewellery and things like that have been made from hawksbills in the past. But then since kind of a mass market ban, global ban, that we have seen like a massive drop in trade for turtle products. So it is an ongoing conservation situation, and there's a lot that obviously that still can be done, especially when it comes to medicinal purposes or just taste preference, and that's sort of part of the work that I'm doing currently in the Maldives. So I'll just quickly run through sort of the types of facilities that we have. This is how the Maldives Rescue Centre started. So when I first turned up in 2016, we didn't have anything at all. It was a dive centre that we were converting into a veterinary clinic. So we had a very basic setup on the left. And now, like I said, almost 10 years later, we have a really wonderful clinic. We've got two surgical rooms and one laboratory room. We have access to blood machines, to radiography, to endoscopy, to ultrasounds, Dopplers. It's kind of a fully functioning clinic in the middle of the Maldives. And it's the kind of facility that we're trying to promote, to say that you don't have to have very much initially to expand to be able to treat turtles well. And we'll just quickly run through the physical exam. So as sea turtles, obviously wildlife animal, and from the sea, they're very not used to sort of seeing humans and being that close in proximity to them. So we always try and keep handling to a minimum, noise reduction, and just want to get the basic parameters sort of looked at, obviously on land, and then also another kind of physical exam inside the water to make see how they're swimming, how they're moving. So we do the same things that we would do for any other animal. You know, we're looking at the weight, giving a body condition score, looking at the heart rate with the Doppler, measuring their respirations and listening to the quality of that. An overall external examination, you know, for external wounds, and then we do from the head to the tail approach. So eyes, nose, mouth, feeling for any kind of crepitus in the flippers, and also looking at, you know, ectoparasites as well. So things like leeches, barnacles, anything that might be attached to their integument. So we can offer, just like any other clinical lab, basic kind of diagnostics. So blood analysis, fecal analysis, cytologies, obviously radiography, ultrasonography, and even more higher end, depending on the clinic themselves, the endoscopy and the CTs and MRI scanning. So we do a lot of blood analysis to check for obviously white blood cell counts, checking for infection. And we do that manually. We do that because of reptile blood and those beautiful red blood cells. It's actually easier and more reliable to do this manually than a lot of the machines that obviously now specifically for exotics or wildlife. So we still do this with a Neubauer chamber, and that's one of our nurses, Tristan, there doing the blood smears. Radiography is a really important part of turtle medicine, especially with entanglements. Unfortunately, a lot of the turtles that we see develop osteomyelitis as a follow-up from these horrific injuries that they receive. So we do have to do regular radiographic checks to see if that disease is progressing or whether we've managed to stop it with a long course of antibiotics. Here's just a nice little view of what we're looking for with the radiograph. So we've got the lungs clear there on the left. Then we've got sort of little grits and stuff in the intestines, the esophagus over there to the right. And then we've got, looking at the bone structures, the different, especially around the humeral, the shoulder joint, that's tend to where we see the osteomyelitis in these entanglement turtles, because obviously tend to be entangled higher up the arm from the net. And then also looking at the opposite flipper, because these osteomyelitis infections tend to really jump from one flipper to another. So really keeping an eye on that when we're looking at our x-rays. We have the ultrasound that can help for a number of reasons. If we've got slightly older and adult olive ridleys, especially, we just check their reproductive condition, so whether they've got eggs inside or not. And then we also just check to see any free fluids and organ health. And then endoscopy, we find that really useful for those buoyant turtles that I mentioned, to see if there's a lot of air. And see if there's an obvious lung tear, so we can actually see it bubbling when they breathe in. So we're just checking to see if there's an obvious lung tear. But also it's helpful for all other sorts of respiratory, digestive, or even reproductive conditions to have that. And the most common surgeries that we perform, I think this is specifically really in the Maldives, is a lot of limb curettage. So a lot of these horrible entanglement injuries require a lot of debriding, and we tend to do that under local, but with a pain relief, unless they're particularly severe, and then we will GA them. And then we've also got, we don't tend to do coelomic surgery if we can help it. It can be quite a traumatic surgery to recover from, but if there are, let's say, hooks that need to be removed, we can also do that. And then we really rarely try to amputate fully. We want to try and keep as much of that flipper intact as possible. But obviously in situations like this, when it's already gone or there's no way that the bone can be salvaged, amputations are one of the surgeries that are often performed. And then, depending on where the hook is, we will always try to remove those as well. I think the really important thing about, like I mentioned several times, is the release criteria. So we try never to keep a turtle in rehab or rescue care longer than it has to be. And there's kind of three main things that we look out for. Are they able to dive and rest at the bottom and show normal behavior? Are they eating well? So therefore, can they swim well too? So are they able to use all levels of the water column easily? They're not floating or bobbing to the top. And also we will then medically diagnose them with normal blood works and radiographs. So are they acting and performing like a normal sea turtle? If so, there's no reason to keep them. We try and get them out as quickly as we can. So this is what STAR is hoping to achieve. We're really hoping to enhance this local community engagement. So I really believe that rescue centres are sort of the pillars of the turtle conservation world and where they're based. And so they don't just have to work with the rehab specialists or veterinarians or people that are working specifically with treating turtles. They should be engaging the community, whether that means promoting local NGOs that are doing nest watches, beach walks, or even just letting the local community be aware of the kind of work that's happening at these rescue centres. It promotes their conservation. It kind of promotes why we're doing what we're doing. I also would like to hope that by having this network, we're improving the monitoring of turtles that are being found and treated. So creating this kind of concept of this data sharing as well, because there's no point repeating what has been done well somewhere else and trying to learn from the first time by sharing our protocols, for example, what we find works best for different species, having that baseline of hematology or baseline of medical. Even different species have different reactions to different drugs. So knowing that different countries have different species that treat slightly differently, it's just a way to collaborate amongst the veterinary community. And also it addresses emerging threats, papillomatosis, and making sure that there's ways to actually record that in new countries, and any new diseases that might emerge, that might develop, is a great way to sort of share those stories. And also to help strengthen policy and enforcement. As veterinarians, it's our responsibility to sort of speak up for wildlife. And so if things are happening near rescue centres, or the communities are reporting bycatch or illegal take, it's also our responsibility to be a voice for these species. I just want to finish off with a very brief list. This is just some of the organisations that I've found or have heard of around India that are doing beach walks, nest protection. So there's many more, but these organisations obviously are worth reaching out to if you're interested about doing some more turtle work. And part of this year's Gender on Straw is to create a veterinary network of vets in India to help improve the conditions in rescue centres that are currently facilities, and also to hopefully have a fully in-person training workshop, hopefully next year. So please do get in touch if you've got any other questions. And thank you very much for listening, and looking forward to any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Claire, for wonderful work that you are just doing in the islands. I have one question. I'm Daniel from Life Trust India. The thing is, you mentioned about the community program that you are just doing there, and then I would like to just know more about the type of program that you do with the community, whether you could be able to involve them in your conservation programs. The second question is, you also showed a last slide about various organizations involved in India. Do you have any associations, direct associations or support at this point of time, or do you have any other programs in the future? So these are the two things that I want to know from you. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much for your question, Daniel. So the Maldives obviously is the closest rescue centre to what I've been working with for the last 8 years now. And the way we've included our communities surrounding the rescue centres there are quite a few ways. The first main one is we actually host visits to the rescue centre facilities. It was initially aimed at the children, so to going to different schools, getting the support of the local islands and resorts to actually bring the children to the rescue centre to show them what we're doing and to explain, what turtle medicine is, what veterinarians do, and a little bit about turtle conservation in general, because it wasn't particularly well covered as part of their curriculum. And then we expanded that, and when we also included the Environment Protection Agencies to come and see the centre, to get the permits to actually, obviously, they've given us permits for years, but they'd never come to see the work that we were doing. So we got kind of the government, the local government and authorities involved. The police force have also come. We also host festivals every year with different islands around the Maldives. So the Turtle Festival. So it's a kind of combination of fun, so music, games, but also a lot of educational talks from the different scientists that we have. So that's sort of the two more educational ways. But then the way that the network now works within the community is that, like, local fishermen on islands that could be miles away from the rescue centre, we have a hotline. So if they find an entangled turtle, they'll call us, and then we can liaise with getting that turtle to the rescue centre. So the rescue centre really wouldn't work unless we had our patients being found and coming to us. So that's one of the ways that we definitely engage with sea turtles. And the second question is this: we have a couple of I think it's India Watch. There's a couple of NGOs that we are already associated with. I think I'll send them as an email to you afterwards, if that's okay, just so you've got a list of people to get in touch with. And we've got a number of individual vets that have joined STRA that are already part of the community. And that's why I mentioned that there's kind of about 7 or 8 vets already across India that we're hoping to actually make a regional network, because obviously the coastline being as vast as it is, it's quite easy to say, oh yes, we've got some there and some here, but we're hoping to actually have an in-field training course. So I think I'll send you a direct email about the organisations that are already involved. But obviously I'll share the slides as well with you, so you can have the previous slides of the different NGOs that we know of. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And there are two questions here in the chat box. I would like to read it so that it will be recorded as well. What happens to the turtles that are, this is a question from April Yoda. What happens to the turtles that are not able to return to their natural habitats?
So this is a great question, and it's one of the biggest difficulties I think you can have with rescue rehabilitation. So a number of things can happen. Obviously, if they are too poorly to survive the veterinary treatment, obviously they do obviously pass away in our rescue centres. Depending on where you are in the world, euthanasia is an option. And I know that there's certain countries, like in the Maldives when I started, we legally couldn't euthanize. It wasn't something that had ever been done before in the country. So we had turtles that were with us for a number of years. And ultimately, some of the injuries that we had meant that they actually died during their stay with us. If they have different criteria for either euthanasia or release, some people would argue that, even if it was missing 2 flippers, it's better to give a chance to a turtle in the wild than keeping it for its entire life at the rescue centre. So it tends to be a very kind of case-by-case basis as to whether turtles are kept or not, and whether they survive treatment or not, basically. But there are turtles that are, I guess you'd call them display animals at rescue facilities around the world that have been given or deemed unreleasable. But if euthanasia is not an option, then that tends to be what happens. But I think we have now at the Olive Ridley Project, for example, we have quite a clear euthanasia guidelines as what is allowed and what's not. Because ultimately these animals can live for 80 years. So especially if you get them, or plus, 80 plus, I should say, if you get them as a juvenile, most facilities don't have the capacity to house turtles like that. There have been examples of turtles that have been moved to aquarium around the world, so that ones that are deemed unreleasable. And it's a debate in itself. It's actually one of the talks that we're hoping to have later this year is get a number of vets on an online platform and discuss, what are the best practices for these cases. Because, if a turtle really has 1 flipper, for example, but otherwise able to, buoyancy is not an issue, is able to actually navigate a large tank with 1 flipper, is it better to use that as an example of the fishing industry and what it's doing to our oceans than keeping an otherwise healthy individual in captivity? So there's a big debate about that, but ultimately, I believe that if a turtle is not able to be released and it is able to be euthanized in the country that it's found in, then it is a welfare issue keeping a wild animal like that in a small confined tank for a number of years.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, thank you. There is one question from Dr. Ganga from Sri Lanka. What are the long-term survival prospects of sea turtles with amputated front flippers?
So that's a great question. And I have 2 answers. One is there's been a paper recently, I think from last year, that actually has shown the number of nesting turtles with missing flippers, both front and back. And back is even more impressive if you think about it, because they're still able to dig that nest chamber with just 1 flipper or half a flipper. And they're still able to get onto the nesting beach with just 1 front flipper. So we can say quite certainly that the turtles can survive really well missing a flipper, 1, if not 1 and a bit, or 2, if it's opposite sides. So that's proof that they're still surviving from nesting. But also we've had a few turtles of our own that we've put satellite tags on when we've let them leave the rescue centre from the Maldives, and they've gone as far as the Philippines. So we've been tracking them for as long as the tags have allowed us to. So just proof of the distance that they've travelled from the release has really helped us feel more confident in releasing turtles with missing flippers. And then in terms of wild turtles that we see on the reef, especially like hawksbills and greens that are more resident in the Maldives, we often see old injuries like shark bites when they must have been younger turtles. So we know turtles are actually quite surprisingly resilient with missing flippers. I always compare it to like a dog or a cat missing a leg, but in the sea they've got the added support of water. So we know that they can survive really well with one amputated flipper, but there have been examples of turtles still nesting with more.
Yeah, thank you. There is one question from Iris Pravesti. Hi, Dr. Claire. Thank you for the presentation. Would you mind sharing anesthetic protocol in turtles? Do you need a ventilator? Do you need to ventilate turtle when anesthetized? That's a question. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, we've got protocols through STRA, so I'm happy to share some of those protocols with you. And so we do put in an ET tube, but just for oxygen, but we don't really have to for shorter surgeries. So like our wound debridements and things, we don't tend to. They tend to breath hold anyway, and they tend to shunt when we're using GA. So it's not necessary. And we only use injectable anesthetics. We don't use inhalational because if they're breath holding, there's not much point really trying to do that. So we do put in an ET tube just if we want to give them some oxygen. But if we tend to give them oxygen, it tends to even slow down their ability to recover as well. So it's a kind of it's a big anesthetic difficulty, but it is there if we need to support them. But ultimately, we do a quick injection. It will last between half an hour and an hour, depending on obviously on the size of the turtle and topping up. But yeah, we tend to use ketamine as our main anesthetic, and then pain relief. Sort of, we would also give tramadol, and so. Ideally, if we can get away without having to use any inhalationals, we don't need it. So you probably saw in the rescue centre there wasn't one. So yeah, I will share some protocols as well. And so yeah, pain relief is also something that's often neglected in sea turtles. I think we think of them as these like really hardy reptile species, but look at some of those injuries that you saw from those ghost nets. I think it's really important to provide longer pain relief than probably is expected with these species.
Thank you, Claire, for all the answers. Is there any other questions for Dr. Claire? Yeah, if there is any more questions, maybe we'll just send it to you. And now I hand over the session to Dr. Heidi Riddle for her conclusion. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Claire. That was super interesting, especially for somebody like me that knows nothing about sea turtles, but very interesting. So in conclusion, this is the last webinar of the series for 2024-2025. This is number 6. We've been doing them every other month. They all have been recorded, and we will be sharing the link to this webinar in the next couple of days. And so you can always go back and look at the other webinars. We've covered a variety of species. Of course, elephants are one of the main ones because of the support of Asian elephant support. But also, as you heard in this particular webinar, a number of other species as well. We also, because this is the last in this series, we're going to be sending a link for feedback. We would like your feedback about the series to see what you would like to see maybe in the future. We are hoping to continue with the webinars, but we do have to basically be able to apply for some funding support to be able to continue the webinars. But we also like to know what topics you would like to see within the realm of wildlife disease investigation. So we'll be doing that. And again, if you have any questions for any of the presenters, whether it was from today's webinar or previous webinars, let us know. We can always put you in touch with the presenters directly. Some of them have shared their email addresses in the chat box. So, obviously, if you want to contact them directly, that's fine. And as I said, we will have the recordings available. We will not make available the PowerPoints because that is something that, the individual presenters can decide whether they want to share or not. But as far as having the recordings available, then if you need further information from a particular presentation, you can get it from the recording. So again, thanks very much for everyone, especially the presenters today. And yeah, we hope to see you again when we start up the next series, probably in a couple months. So thanks again, everyone. We really appreciate all your attention and your participation in these webinars. Thank you.